Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope everything is good and great and wonderful. I have my Kindle because I want to talk about books. We'll probably do a review. I don't know. As you might be aware, I wrote a book in November. It sucks. I'm going to come back to it and rewrite it someday, but for right now, I think I need to write some more stories just to formalize the rules in my world a little bit in my head. So I want to write a few novellas. That's my plan. I'm going to write some 30,000 word stories, 40,000, somewhere around there, just to kind of get the ideas firmly in my head before I go back and tackle the bigger book. And it just so happened that this week on tour.com, they were giving away an entire series of novellas called The Wayward Children from Seanan McGuire. And I've heard of this series quite a bit through people that I follow who cross over between the board game industry and reading. And the reason is because Seanan writes about marginalized people. She has a whole lot of LGBTQ plus, I'm probably missing an adjective, characters. And in this one, I can't remark on the series. I've only read about 1.5 of them so far. But in the first book, I think she covered the whole spectrum. I think there's something in there for everybody in that community. So the board game community is super inclusive, like crazy inclusive. And a lot of the people that I follow in the board game community are very vocal about inclusivity. And so when I often hear about books from that side of the community who are also readers, I get to hear a lot about books that are inclusive. And the first book in this series, Every Heart a Doorway, I think is called. I hope I didn't get that wrong. Every Heart a Doorway is very inclusive, extremely inclusive, and it's also really just fun. It's a short read. I think I maybe did it in about 3 hours. I might be exaggerating. It might have been more like 4 or 5, but I felt like it couldn't have been more than 5 hours. It was a pretty quick read. It is a novella. All of these books in this series are novellas. It's a novella series. And they were giving them away, which, for one, this is a public service announcement. If you're not aware that tour.com gives away books, you can go sign up for their tour.com Book of the Month Club, and they give away at least one book every month. But like this week, they gave away a book every day of the week. And that's a pretty great way to get some free reading material, and it's coming from a publisher who, these books have been in print, they have weight, and, I'm not saying that I'm going to dig myself a hole, but I'm not saying that free books necessarily means bad. I'm not saying that at all, but what I'm saying is that these are vetted and probably edited books that are really solid products. And I really enjoyed this first book. The idea of the series is that there are children who, at some point in their lives, find a doorway to another world. Imagine, if you will, Alice in Wonderland or Narnia or, I don't know. I'm sure there's countless other stories about going through the mirror or going through going through a doorway or whatever into another world. The idea in this book is that's real. It's a very real thing. These people go into these other worlds, and the core concept of the first book is, or the core theme, I guess, of the first book is, what happens to those people when they come back? When they come back and they've been in this fairyland for 5 years, and they come back and it's only been a couple of months, and their parents thought they were dead, and now they just walk back into their real world, and they tell these stories about all these things they did. They're thought to be completely batshit crazy, and they get sent away. So this book one, focuses on Eleanor's School for Wayward Children, which is the place where these kind of people go. And the book follows a character. Her name is Nancy, and she went to a underworld type place where she was with ghosts and corpses, and she, I don't know. I don't want to tell you the whole story, but when she came back, this world is just not for her anymore, and she wants desperately to go back. We find out that very few kids ever get to go back. And so that's what this school is about. It's kind of trying to institutionalize them to our world instead of that world, because the rules in that world are different. And it seems that Every child's world that they get to go into is different for them. It matches their personality. It becomes that's the world where everything makes sense. Whereas, we've all gone through adolescence, right? Adolescence in this world doesn't make sense to anybody. It's a complete hormonal nightmare. In that world, they get to be the person that they feel like they are, completely and wholly. And so there's vast differences between the worlds that they go to. Our main character, Nancy, went to an underworld. There are characters that go to nonsense worlds where nothing makes sense and it's all candy and rainbows. Other people go to high logic worlds, which are, very structured and formal. So it's a really neat concept. What happens after you come back? And it's spun together with some other mystery type elements in a very neat way. The second book, I'm about halfway through the second book, is a vastly different book. Like, it opens up, and I want to say that the first few chapters, definitely the first chapter, reads like the opening to Harry Potter. And I don't mean that to be derogatory. I don't mean that to mean like it's a ripoff. But it's so much of a angular turn from the first book that it almost feels like, whoa, wait, is this like an entirely different story? So in that first book, it starts off kind of Nancy's parents are at this place, and the lady tells them that she can help her daughter heal, and then Nancy shows up, and then the story of these kids learning about each other's worlds and taking place in this school happens. In the opening of book 2, which is called something like Beneath the Down Among the Sticks and Bones, opens up with like this very cheeky look at these adult people who have a set of twins who were main characters in the first book. And it's done in a very like, they think everything's going to be perfect and it's not perfect, and they have these twins. It's this really cheeky, very, very, very similar to the way Harry Potter opens, with the whole concept that these two parents expected their children to be perfect, and they found out their children aren't perfect. And then what happens after that. So it was a really weird turn. But the whole point of me wanting to talk about this right now, before I finish this series, I'll probably try to do like some sort of review of all 5 books, because I think the 6th book came out this week, and I'll probably end up buying it just so I could talk about it all as a set. I think we'll see. We'll see if it's worth talking about. But the thing that really inspired me was I wrote 50,000 words about this character going through this adventure in this world that I created, and it felt forced in a lot of places because I didn't know the story yet. I was experiencing the story for the first time as I was writing it. And so a lot of it feels forced and weird. And I now want to write a few smaller, more tight stories about this character to try to figure out the world a little bit better, to try to figure out the character a little bit better before I go back and tackle the edit on that first book. And what I realized is the tone that she took in that first chapter of that second book being so dramatically different from the previous book, that's really kind of inspiring, because I'm right now struggling with when I wrote the first book, I created this magic system that is based on soul. It's based on life. It's based on me being able to draw in energy from living things around me and use that energy to do stuff, which might mean that I kill things as I'm doing that. And I had this picture in my head of how it worked. I had this picture in my head of how all of these things are interconnected, and waves of energy are flowing through everything, and you can pull on these threads and these strings, and you can piece them together and make stuff happen. And I explained a lot of that in my first draft, and the truth is I didn't really want to. I wasn't wanting to explain all of that. I was wanting to be just much more like, and then a fireball happened, right? There's no fireballs, but whatever. And then this happened, and I don't talk to you, the reader, at all about how it happened. You don't need to know that, my main character plucked some threads from this squirrel and this, stream and pieced them together and caused a puff of wind or whatever. You don't need to know how all that works. You just need to know that he waved his hand and something happened. And I think that seeing how the tone change in this it gave me kind of a license to go, hey, wait, I can completely change the tone of this story. It doesn't have to be the same tone. Just because it's the same character in the same world doesn't necessarily mean I need to write it from the same kind of scientific viewpoint. So, Wayward Children. I think it's fun. I will do probably a deeper look into the series once I read them and let you know. But if you're interested in like a book by book review, please let me know in the comments below, and I will keep you updated as I finish them. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking and commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you again Monday. Today's word you should know to sound smart is diffident. It is an adjective meaning to be uncertain or unsure about making a decision or taking an action, to lack confidence and boldness. If you feel diffident about driving a Rolls Royce, you can always buy a Bentley. Diffident, D-I-F-F-I-D-E-N-T. I definitely feel diffident about my ability to finish this book. I would say I feel diffident about most things.